Hi, Steve. How are you doing today?
Very good. Thank you, Sam.
Great, great. Thanks very much for joining us today on the episode of PodLeaders. Really excited to have you on the show and appreciate you taking time out your probably busy, very busy schedule to record today. The title of today's episode is Scaling Success: Insights from a Global Revenue Leader. Okay. And for those that haven't tuned into these episodes before, just a little bit of context here. And the premise of what we're doing is we're inviting thought leaders and senior leaders across the sort of software, SaaS and MarTech space to kind of bring and unpack different topics that we think would add value to our kind of mutual community and networks. My name's Simon Gregory. I'm a director of a recruitment company called Thornton Gregory. We specialize in this space and sort of, support companies, mostly VC or private equity backed companies, sort of scale their go-to-market teams across the US and EMEA. So over the 10 years that I've been doing it, I built a pretty wide network, speaking to people like Steve, and wanted to kind of give a little bit back to the community and our networks, and provide a bit more of additional value than we were currently. So last summer we set this up. Again, for people that haven't tuned in before, it's stuff around like today, which is all around CRO sort of perspectives, but we've also done stuff around RevOps, sales enablement, customer success, and many other topics alike. So really excited to bring Steve on today. And the reason why we're bringing Steve onto the show, amongst a lot of people that I've met, is for people that don't know, and I'm sure he'll share a little bit about his story. He's got an incredible background in this particular space, having led as VP sales at Responsys, I believe prior to the Oracle acquisition, and then Brightedge, Selligent, and then held a number of CRO positions at Livewire and also Adara, before finally kind of when we bumped into each other at Twilio, where he's running a very large book of business there across the kind of segment marketing automation product lines and also SendGrid. So I'm sure knows a thing or two about how to build a world-class revenue team and culture, and a few of the things we're going to discuss about today. But Steve, look, that's my little kind of drum roll sort of entrance. For people that don't know you, on top of and above of what I've just kind of mentioned there, would you mind just bringing people up to speed with your sort of career today and professional background, please?
God, you've done such a great job, Simon. I almost don't know what to add. No, thank you for that wonderful intro. Yeah, I had kind of an interesting career, a little bit unique. I started out in computer science, made my way through being in IT and working for some large companies doing IT work around the world. Found my way into solutions engineering or pre-sales role, and was working on both very highly technical network management products, and then started moving towards more business products like marketing tech and ad tech, and actually have been involved with MarTech and ad tech products since the early 2000s, and have really seen that industry evolve. I had an opportunity sort of serendipitously to actually move from a sales engineering team that I was managing to managing a sales team, and took that, what at the time seemed like a little bit of a scary leap into the sales side of things, and I've never looked back, and I've really enjoyed it. And I feel like a lot of the things that I've done before, having come from an analytical, technological background, have really helped me. It's helped me kind of hone in my skills around how do you do something very repeatably? How do you stay very, process oriented and focused? How do you keep iterating the sales motion and the sales process, and taking in all of the latest developments in how people sell, and how we went from the concept of a solution sale where we showed up and we said, here's our solution, you should buy this, to more of a active listening, trying to understand the customer's needs. And as we headed through challenger selling and medpick and command the message, where really the job of a seller over the years has evolved into being a teacher, right? Which I think is important. And when you think about what does it mean to be a teacher, You're there to listen. You're there to bring new information to the table. You're trying to help somebody understand how that information is relevant to their business, but you're also there to periodically challenge somebody's point of view in a polite and professional way, because you're really focused on how to drive the best outcome for them and their business. Right. And I think that's really how a lot of these things have evolved, and have evolved the same way for me. I've worked at smaller companies, medium and larger companies. As you mentioned, Simon, Responsys, we took that business when I joined. We were a little over 100 people and doing around 20 million. When I left that business, we were well north of 1,400 people doing 250 million. We had gone through a successful IPO, and then actually ended up selling that business. So I've been through the whole process of what does it take to shape a company up, in the level of rigor and discipline in order to make it a public company. What is it like to actually execute quarterly in a public company where it's not just your board you're held accountable to, but you're really held accountable to the whole world, and everything you do is out in the open, all the way through to, what is it like to take a company back private and do mergers and acquisitions. And all those roads eventually brought me to Twilio, where I had a chance to really take advantage and apply a lot of the things that I learned, and learn new things at a very large global scale. And so it's a pleasure to be here today and a chance to talk to your listeners.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. I love that analogy with the teacher. Also, in terms of, we generally ask people with, your kind of level of experience about mentors and influential figures along the way that may have played a kind of pivotal role in shaping your career. Have you had any of those that you can mention? And if so, like, who were, if you don't mind mentioning who they were and why, that would be awesome.
You know what? You have to always give credit where credit is due to great people you meet in your life that influence you in some capacity. What is the saying? A reason or a season, right? And
Okay.
A lot of these people for me have been a season, if you will. A gentleman by the name of Al Ross was somebody that I met very early in my career, when I was just moving from being an IT network professional to being on the sales side and doing solutions engineering. And Al really taught me a lot about how to sell, and I think that has stayed with me. And to this day, we're close friends and our families are friends. And I still periodically, banter on about different things and advice with Al. So, quite an influence in my life. And then Russell Worth, another very good business friend and acquaintance who runs some great teams at Adobe these days. Russell was the gentleman that gave me the opportunity to make a switch from managing pre-sales teams to managing sales teams. And I learned a tremendous amount from Russell, and owe him unbelievable gratitude for the opportunity that he presented me and for the ability to learn under him. And then at Responsys, I met our CEO at the time, Dan Springer, and there was just so many different lessons that I learned from Dan along the way, which were just incredible. And, some of the probably biggest takeaway that I remember from many conversations that I had with Dan is that, as a leader, you really have to make sure that you're centered on the outcomes and growth of the business. And you always have to figure out how to manage that alongside with looking out for the individuals and the teams and developing and fostering people. But it's very important to reconcile those two things, making sure that you are being the most professional steward of the business that you can. And that's sometimes hard for people. And I think that sometimes people sort of think they've reached their professional maturity. But if you pause and you put that lens on how you think about and how you operate, I would challenge every person that you can continue to grow your professional career. And it does just take that sort of small, maybe difference of alignment and thinking. And I greatly appreciate that and many other lessons and things that I've learned from Dan over the years.
Amazing. Yeah. Okay, cool. In terms of you talked a little bit about alignment in terms of thinking, but maybe if we look at alignment in a different sense, alignment between sales, product and marketing teams in software companies, what's the importance of that when related to revenue strategy?
Yeah, everybody talks about that being important. Well, of course, people should get along. And how do you run a business if those departments aren't all, smoothly working together? When you really when you really break it down, right, there's sort of two key aspects that are important. Number one is I like to call it as sell what you have so you can fund what you want. What does that mean? That means you have to sell the product you have. You could complain about what it does or doesn't do and why you lose a deal, but in order to get the product to develop, you need to fund the R&D, which means you need to sell the current iteration. So having that relationship and that mindset when working with product is critical. And on the marketing side, everybody from the sales side always would like to say, I need more leads and I need them better quality. And of course, it's easier to say that, but you have to take a step back and look at yourself and say, what is my process? When I get that lead, am I actually rigorously working every single lead? Am I giving every lead the same level of attention? And is there something that I can do to iterate before I start to reflect on whether the quality of my leads or the number of leads is where it needs to be, right? And I think if people come in with that attitude, it changes the game, it changes the equation, and all of a sudden, the marketing team can't do enough for you versus being somebody very challenging to work with in that situation.
Mm. Okay, and you maybe touched upon there from a kind of maybe personality or cultural fit. But what are the challenges that you find in trying to get that alignment within those teams? And how have you, within your experience, sort of overcome them?
Yeah, the challenges is sort of preconceived behaviors. As you go from company to company, it's easy to come in and look at the other person as an adversary that's somehow standing in the way of your success instead of looking at each other as true colleagues and trying to help each other. I've always come in and I've always asked the product teams, the marketing teams, what's important to you? What's getting in the way of you currently feeling like you're really successful in hitting the metrics the company expects of you and you expect of yourself? And if you start with that mindset, it really does change the conversation
Mm.
because they're just waiting for you to present the win-loss analysis and tell them why it's their fault. Or they're waiting for you to present, the MQL numbers and how many are converting to opportunities and tell them that they're not giving you the quality. They're not prepared for you to come in and ask the question in reverse, right? And I think
Mm.
by asking the question in reverse is how it starts to change the conversation. And I come in and I work with the teams that I'm directly in charge for, and I have the same conversations with them, right? And I think as you get people to understand that, it really does allow you to change things. It's sort of like when people get frustrated with each other and you start, you see and hear this over the years. I'm frustrated with such and such a person, so I'm going to write in an email because I'm not a confrontational person live, and I'm going to express my negative feelings via email. And then it goes back and forth, right? And those things never reach a healthy conclusion.
Yeah.
Well, have the conversation live. Talk about what you think may be going on, right? And I think that's a big thing. I think that's very underrated these days. Have a conversation live. And obviously live can be on Zoom, video call can be in person, but have it live. Don't just do it asynchronously through Slack or email and expect that you're being a good contributor to the business.
Yeah. Is that something that you've naturally done across your career? Or again, have you picked that up as, some guidance early on that you've seen to work through somebody else?
I think on the product side, having come from
Yeah.
being a computer science major and having been involved with product, I can appreciate how difficult product is. I can also appreciate when the product side tries to confuse the sales side, right? Because I think there's a little bit of both. So being able to be appreciative, but also calling people out when somebody says, oh, well, that's going to take 3 quarters. Really? Like, you could be a little more honest with us. I think you could probably do it in one. I understand you need to hedge a bit, so let's call it a quarter and a half and let's be done with that conversation. On the marketing side, honestly, I just had the opportunity, at Responsys and a few other companies to work with some incredible marketers, people that I just couldn't express how much I appreciate their passion for
Mm.
helping to drive the business. And that for me that gave me the opportunity to start to look at marketing as a much closer friend and business associate versus somebody that potentially is just, on the other side of me saying, well, I'm not doing a good job converting the things that they're sending over. So that was definitely impactful in meeting the right people. And I think you have to find those companies and you have to seek those people out. If you don't make that your goal, you're not going to, right? So I think it's like, people write in journals and diaries, different things about gratitude and what they want to achieve. I mean, it's something you should write down. Seek out somebody in such and such a department that I traditionally haven't built rapport with and go make that happen. Don't wait for that other person, right? I think that's critical.
Okay. How do you define and refine ideal customer profiles to ensure targeted and efficient sales efforts across your businesses?
Yeah, that is honestly the hardest thing in every single company. And I can't think of a company that I've been a part of where we always got it right. And I think
Okay.
the first thing is you have to go into it with a mindset that an ideal customer profile, unlike a Webster's dictionary definition of a word, is something that will always change. It will never stay the same. So I think you have to start with that mindset. It means you have to be very open and knowing that you're constantly adjusting. And everyone's always heard this, change is constant. And it is very much so an ideal customer profile. And back to, it shouldn't be what you expect it to be at some point
Okay.
that's tomorrow. It needs to match what you're able to be today, right? And I think those are the two key things. It's not what you expect it to be, it's what you're able to deliver on. And as long as you're taking that mindset to defining it, what industries should be buying from me, within those industries, what types of business problems, well, does that characterize a smaller or larger company that would have those problems? Would those problems be solved by internal employees, or would they need to outsource that problem somehow to a software provider or to an outsourced team? And getting as deep as possible is very critical. So narrower is always better than broader. Even though it sounds great, I want to have a big addressable market, but what good is a big addressable market if your win rates in that market are low? Is that really your addressable market? Probably someone else's, but not yours.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there like a process though, just to maybe go one layer deeper on that? Is there a process that you go when you join a business? If you haven't found what the ICP is there like a playbook that you follow to try and help that journey?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely at least a framework, right? I would say playbook. I would love to say that there's a playbook. That may be a little bit more challenging, but I think the framework starts with conducting a win-loss analysis, and a lot of times people are afraid of that. But you go into whatever your system of record is, Salesforce, whatever it is that you're using, you dump all the data because you don't actually know which columns mean what and what consistency people put in them. And then you go through and you look at the different columns across the wins and the losses, and you try to form some perspectives of why did we seem to lose? Why did we seem to win? Then you take that information, you take it to your solutions consultants, your pre-sales team, you take it to your services team, and then you take it to your product teams, and you try to get some validation. Are these real? Or does it actually do what this person noted it doesn't do? You kind of combine that information. And I think that allows you to form a pretty reasonable idea of what the expanse of the capabilities are. And then from that, industries is definitely a critical component, use cases, size of, company. And then depending on, your scope, which regions of the world potentially, right? Because maybe some products have regulations or limitations. Those would be the top sort of 4 or 5 things that you'd want to put into your framework. And then obviously you can go a little narrower and deeper based on your expertise in that area.
Okay, cool. Could you elaborate a little bit on the process of lead scoring and lead nurturing and its impact on driving conversions?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been in companies where you turn on Marketo, you configure Marketo, and out of the box, it gives you some kind of a scoring algorithm. And there's, obviously many other products that do similar things. And there's built whole industries over the years, right, that have done nothing but lead scoring and lead routing. The challenge is, does that scoring model truly work for your product type, your industry, the markets that you're in? Is it, you want to look at that again specific to smaller, medium, and large accounts? Is it consistent, specific to the Americas versus EMEA
Mm.
or Asia Pacific markets? It's important to rationalize that, not just look at it top line, because sometimes
Mm.
top line looks great but isn't indicative of the issues that you may be having, and potentially you're leaving money on the table and some very frustrated employees in those regions. So that's critical. And then the lead nurturing piece, oftentimes I feel is just not great in a lot of companies. I think we're all striving and we're starting to get better, but I can't remember the last time I've joined a company where they've had the best lead nurturing across those leads. And the reason I say that is it's not to criticize marketing, it's not to criticize the concept of lead nurturing, it's to criticize the resources we have and the depth of the lead nurturing program that we set up. In most cases, lead nurturing is to drop something at the front door. And we all talk about customer marketing, but we don't extend lead nurturing after it's progressed through the front door,
Mm-hmm.
after we've landed the product. What is the lead nurturing? What is the machine-based lead nurturing we're doing to expand our product within that company, how it's used, where it's used, department, division, geography. That's the part of lead nurturing that I feel is the most under-resourced. And oftentimes
Mm-hmm.
there's just no one to put against, building that. And I think that's a critical part of every company.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What strategies do you employ to effectively convert MQLs to sales qualified leads across different geographies and sales segments? I think what I mean by that is enterprise, mid-market type of segments, I believe.
Yeah, and that's where I think this aligns, what we were just talking about a little bit earlier with the
Yeah.
ICP, right? I think that's critical. And back to the, what we started this whole discussion with, that alignment between product leadership, marketing leadership, and sales leadership. If I'm in the Asia Pacific market, I need to make sure that the ICP that we developed as a company is relatively applied to my region with whatever challenges or limitations or competition that may exist in my region uniquely, so that the lead sources and the MQLs we're bringing in are as closely in line with that ideal customer profile as possible. And if that's the case, then hopefully the sales process we designed specific to that ideal customer profile should yield the best conversion into opportunities, right? So it's sort of checking those boxes. Are we working with the generic company ICP? Did we spend the time to adapt it to our region, both on the marketing lead sourcing side, as well as in how we're executing the sales process? That's the alignment that has to happen within the region. And you can have the best laid plans and roll that out globally, but every team has to take that ownership and adjust it within their business accordingly.
You've worked for global businesses, I'm sure, covering all corners of the globe. Is that a very difficult process and journey to roll that out effectively across the geographies, given the kind of fragmented or cultural challenges within the different, maybe even APAC or even EMEA geographies?
I find that sometimes it's difficult in smaller companies and sometimes it's difficult in larger companies, and there are different
Yeah.
types of difficult. And what I mean by that is, in a smaller company, you may come in and the different regions are all doing different things.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they're not aligned. So that means you have to align them slowly, and you have to get the regions to agree. And maybe that occurs because you had one individual leading, one region, another individual leading a different, and they were parallel in their scope and responsibility. And so they chose to
Yeah.
do things different ways. And I remember a time, I'm not going to mention the companies, that I've been parts of that as well. So,
Yeah.
not outside of that. And then in a larger company, I think what happens is there's that global mandate of here's what we're doing. And then the challenge is, whose job is it to ensure that that is rolled out with a lens specific to the region? Sometimes you have that focus. Sometimes the person in the region or the people in the region are in charge of multiple things, and they don't have the bandwidth to go deep enough into ideal customer profiles of each of the different product areas or products. And so you need to make sure that the individuals in charge of the marketing lead sourcing, as well as the individuals in charge of the sales process, have some sense of accountability. And the only way that to have that accountability, there needs to be some kind of monthly meeting where you sit down and you look at those key metrics together and you question yourselves, right? If the accountability is qualitative and verbal, that means there's no accountability.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. How do you tailor MQL to SQL conversion strategies based on specific products offered by a company?
Yeah, so that's also, interesting and something that I saw was done very well at Twilio. And it's probably one of the first times I've seen somebody do a really good job of it. And you could do it with a product like Tableau or Looker or, other sort of data analytics tools. But somebody actually built out the analysis of if I have 3 products or 10 products or 20 products in my company, if customer signs up for product 1, what is the then impact on likelihood and conversion that they buy product 2, product 3, product 4, versus if they start with product 2. So looking at the entry point and the impact of the entry point through that product on the other products is very critical, because that also helps you think about, well, geez, if people that buy product 2 and product 4 out of my 10 products seem to then drive the largest spend with me across multiple products, perhaps I should unequally allocate more marketing budgets to those 2 products because they drive the rest, versus just equally allocating, right? Things of that nature. That's very critical.
Yeah,
and a lot of companies don't do that because that takes some work.
No,
you know what I mean? That definitely takes some work.
Yeah. And was that a particularly talented marketer that created that framework to give you that visibility, or is without giving away the secret sauce?
Yeah, I would say that, Simon. I think I would say I think that's a fair way to characterize this individual in this group, because I had not seen that level of detail in a lot of other companies. So I have to say that yes, they took it on their own initiative. Nobody came to Dev and said, here was the playbook you should have used. They applied their own analytical thinking to, how do I make sure that we're spending wisely, and how do I do that, and how do I apply filters by region, because this behavior may be different by region, and I don't want to just prescribe it globally.
That's really cool. And that was a big success, you say, for Twilio.
It was very successful because, again, the numbers are the numbers. It's not a qualitative discussion. We don't just say, if you and I are having a banter and you say, well, I think when people buy apples, they always then buy oranges, and then they get a craving for strawberries. No, it's what the data actually shows. We're not guessing. It's what they're actually buying from us. So that's very helpful to know.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Okay. Exec Connect early in the sales cycle is pretty crucial, I believe, in your mind. But how do you approach and facilitate these executive connections to drive sales success?
Yeah, there's a lot of companies and a lot of philosophies that say you should sell bottoms up, sell to the practitioner, the end user. The challenge is, unless you're selling something that's a couple $1,000s, that individual is not the one who's in charge of the budget. They could be extremely excited about what you have to sell. It may even make their life tremendously easier and provide them career growth in their company. But you're expecting that individual to relate to the people who hold the budget a very thoughtful analysis of, here's how much I want to spend, here's the problems that it solves, and here's the 5 to 7 times return on investment that you, owners of budget, expect every time we come and ask for budget. And so bottoms up is a challenging approach. Like I said, it works part of the time, but it's hard to scale with that approach. And so I've always been a believer of bottoms up and top down. So what does that mean practically? Whatever stage 3 or whatever discovery stage is in your sales process, that is usually a very good time to have a leader within the go-to-market or sales organization lob in a note on behalf of the account exec to who we believe would be the right budgetary holder and economic buyer at that company, just to apprise them of the fact that our teams are talking and we're looking to see if we can help solve blank issue or problem. Because as that deal progresses, it makes it just a little bit easier to then try to help approach that individual. Because the longer you wait in the sales cycle, the more defensive the end user becomes and the more of a gatekeeper that person becomes, right? And that's something that you have to really, take into account.
Okay. And practically on such a big go-to-market effort like you've been involved in, do you have to be very careful with your time about what and where you do that? Or is there like a criteria that sits and you go, right, that's worth that kind of exec connect?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely need to create some boundaries, right? Otherwise, it could become just, something that you can't actually execute on. I think it
Yeah.
depends on the company. I think you need to look at your ASP, your average selling price in terms of the average deal, maybe by segment or region, get an idea of, how many of those you need, maybe set that threshold right around that average selling price, maybe a little bit
Mm.
higher. And then, probably use a little bit of judgment depending on bandwidth and, how many deals are flowing through that given leader. Because if you're an individual running a team and maybe you're running anywhere from 6 to 10 or 6 to 12 AEs,
Mm.
you could handle probably 10 or 15 of those a week. Right. And I'm
Yeah.
not saying that's how many you're going to get, but you can, because it's more or less almost the same identical note. The only thing that changes is who you're addressing the salutation to, and maybe a small little blurb of the use case that's maybe slightly tweaked, but even that probably can be relatively interchangeable. So as long as you make it really easy for that individual, it's the AE's job to say, I'm selling to Acme, I'm at Discovery, can you please lob this in? So if you just look at number of deals at Discovery that are right around your average selling price, that's probably loosely defined appropriate criteria to use.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, that's cool. So building that connection early on in the sales cycle, I like that.
That's
And
right.
what's your opinion on trying to drive these face-to-face meetings in post-COVID world as well? Obviously building that rapport with the important peoples in the deals. Like, how much are you getting your teams to travel nowadays or not? What's your opinion there?
Yeah, I think through COVID, a lot of people, we're not going to use the word lazy. We're going to use the
Yeah.
word comfortable. I think a lot of people
Yep.
got very comfortable in
Yep.
whatever environment they're in, and putting on more professional clothing, getting in a car or train or plane, takes a little bit of effort, but nothing substitutes, right, for that
Yep.
face-to-face time. I mean, when you spend time with your family and friends, you push to do that in person, right? You prioritize that. And I think you have to take that same relationship approach to your business activities as well. You have
Yep.
to think about the people you're selling to as they're like engaging with your family. You're going to only get so much done when you're just a talking head in their screen versus the ability to shake a hand, maybe break some bread together, maybe have a coffee, right, whatever is appropriate culturally, and depending on the situation, maybe an opportunity to meet them at an industry event, maybe an
Yep.
event that you stage, with your company specific to that, metro area because you can get enough people. It's utilizing all of those things. It doesn't always have to be an individualized visit. That should be one of the tactics that you use, because then obviously you can scale it appropriately.
Yeah. Yeah. And what we've been talking now for just over 30 minutes, AI and ML. So,
We
AI,
waited 30
well,
minutes, Simon. We
I
waited
know, I
30
was going to
minutes.
say it
Oh my
normally much
goodness.
earlier than that. Obviously, it's a sprawling topic. You could run many episodes just on this stuff. Super cool area, right, of innovation. But how do you personally see that? See those areas, and are there really any cool kind of use cases or things that you're seeing in that area?
Yeah, I have a lot of conversations with a lot of people on these topics, and I think everybody's watching. Somebody just told me the other day, and I really appreciate this. You have CEOs telling their boards that they're going to implement AI and improve productivity in their company by 20% and become profitable, or increase profitability if they're already a profitable company. And the problem is, it sounds great, But one of the biggest challenges, and the gentleman I was talking to about this yesterday, somebody I used to work with closely, who was on the vendor side for many years and has now been on the customer side, working for a very large multi-brand consumer packaged goods company. He said, guess what? The AI is only as good as the data. And let's say the last time we checked data at any company, it's never that great, with maybe a small
No.
number of exceptions. And so you got to be really rational. You got to understand, you got to take inventory of what the data is that you have. Can you afford to invest some amount of time and resources into the data so that data can actually be used to train whatever AI you're trying to solve for, whether your AI is on the front end to do your prospecting and lead generation, whether your AI is on the customer service side or adoption side, right? There's many different areas, obviously, you apply it, whether it's on the advertising side or internally in your company, just for efficiencies, right? A lot of companies are talking about internal workflows, and you have to see which of those areas you can actually influence with AI. And if your data is decent, or if you have enough of the data that is, good, strong enough to be able to train the models, well, then absolutely you should start to apply AI and machine learning and some of the great capabilities to make your business more efficient and better, and to deploy your greatest minds where they can have the best impact for the business. Like, start removing repetitive tasks. We see it when you look at YouTube videos. What are the robotics being used for in a warehouse? They're first being used to unload boxes from a pallet and put them on shelves. And you could say, well, that's not very useful, but it is, because the workers in that warehouse usually hate that activity the most, right? So how do you apply that same thinking of AI to your company? How do you modify and automate things that are repetitive, that aren't things that people enjoy and necessarily want to do with AI? And how do you think of AI as a complement to the people on your team that you'd want to go with from company to company, department to department, because you know that those people add value? So how do you take AI and those people to amplify the value that you can drive? It's not about replacing an individual. It's not about replacing a role. You may find that it replaced tasks. You may find that you need to rewrite job descriptions, and that's okay. But the concept of mutually working between individual and a system that allows you to simplify and automate things so that you can do more and you can go and tackle the things that you previously had no resources or bandwidth to go tackle. And I think we all have that. We're also worried about, we can save jobs and we can decrease, people, and we can replace certain things with AI. Maybe there are areas where that makes sense, but really the question that should be asked is, in order to improve my business, what are the things I could be doing better? What are the things I haven't been doing because I've been under-resourced?
Mm.
And I think that's critical.
Mm. So you personally see, if set up correctly and given the right conditions and foundations, it can be a massive enabler for the world as we know it, yeah, and for the
Absolutely.
sales world.
So look,
Yeah,
we survived the Industrial Revolution somehow. People all found jobs, right? We keep surviving these
yeah,
different revolutions, and I think this is not going to be any different. We're going to use this
yeah,
technology to continue to progress humanity. Hopefully it's used in the right way.
yeah. Good. Just on that, surfing LinkedIn like I do day to day, I've seen there's quite a lot of noise at the moment about um, the sort of classical form of SDRs and outbound, maybe top of funnel sales, yeah, which has historically been, obviously based around cold email, cold calling, and events. There's a couple of the senior leaders within the software space. I won't mention any names, but they've kind of framed it as dead, if you will, right? And that needs a lot of disruption, a lot of innovation. I think really their point around that is to kind of cut through the noise because it's so busy and so noisy. But what's your kind of opinion on SDRs and BDRs, and how do you see that function evolving?
I think you have to break that problem into two, right? There's how do you handle the inbound versus how do you handle the outbound motion? And they are very different. And we sometimes lump them together and we say that's the sales development function. But the skill set is quite different. I would argue that the skill set for handling inbound is
Mm.
a lighter skill set in terms of who you are as an individual, your professional development, versus somebody that has to more thoughtfully go out and solicit and open doors. I think that bringing AI to the inbound function and potentially that over time becomes purely AI makes total sense. It's
Mm-hmm.
not the most complex area. Maybe there's some learnings, and maybe when somebody starts early in your company and they rotate through, maybe they rotate through that, but they rotate through that briefly with the goal of getting them set up for success in outbound. And then I think as you start thinking about outbound, I think you have to break that problem down into, am I outbounding millions, thousands, or tens? And if I'm outbounding millions, yes, we should put some AI the same way we spend money on advertising tech, right? I think it's a complement to, is it a more efficient way to spend my marketing budget? Is where I hope that people are starting to think about it. When I'm outbounding tens and I have 10 accounts or 15 accounts, well, that's very nuanced. I think we're quite a ways far from how should you approach that. That's not a mechanical thing. That's not just collecting a lot of data and quickly a machine forming an opinion and spitting out an email template. That is all the things you mentioned earlier. How do I just keep inviting somebody for a coffee? A machine would never do that. A machine would want to go deep and tell them about their use case and how they're not doing it and how they reported in their 10K that they're having an issue in this one business unit. That's what a large language model would do because it's trying to correlate all that data. A human would say, no, not for this account. This account, I just need to keep asking for a coffee meeting because once I get that coffee meeting, I'm going to make a breakthrough. And that's very different. Or, not to completely jest here, but, I've seen tactics of, we were calling years ago into a company to remain nameless. Some people may be aware of it that sells meat across the country. Well, what did we do to break through? Our SDR at the time was very ingenious. He took a picture of himself with one of their meat products in the fridge, opening the fridge and showing how many of their other meat products he had, and he sent it to them, and they really appreciated the level of effort he took to try to get their attention, and he got a conversation. No large language model would think of doing something like that, right? That's
Yeah.
something that for the foreseeable future, I think only we humans have that type of ingenuity. So again, where do you apply it? Where do we think something is quote unquote dead versus where something needs to evolve? I think it's important to bring that into the conversation. Otherwise, you just say, oh, slap AI over all of sales development and call it a day. But I don't think that's going to get us the results we want.
Yeah. I love some of those stories about the sort of creative thinking, like the handwritten letters or the
Yeah.
physical gifts, books I've heard people send, like that are related to their function. No, that's cool. So let's go on to a little bit around kind of culture, the building of culture, and clearly you've been involved with some extremely high growth businesses, and I'm sure you've built some amazing teams. How do you personally build a culture that attracts the best talent?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. Culture is important, and I think it's something that we don't always spend enough time on. Even though I'd like to believe that as an industry, especially in technology, we've really tried to focus in on that much more about values and what does it mean. I'm gonna share my very personal, very simple aspect of it is, and I took it from a book that my 25-year-old pointed me to, a book called Give and Take by Adam Grant. Recognize people constantly. And that's the culture. And what does that mean? That means, Simon, I don't congratulate you on putting out a great new episode of your podcast, and that's the only time I recognize you. I don't just give you positive and or negative or positive and or constructive feedback when we get together once a year, every 6 months for a performance review. But I tell you all along the way on a regular basis the different things that you're doing that are adding value and contributing. And that's important because everybody needs to feel seen. Some of us, maybe less than others, feel like we need someone's positive input on what we're doing. But at the end of the day, I think we all appreciate it. And that's very difficult to do. And it takes a commitment. I journal every day. Some people journal weekly, monthly. Everyone has a different approach, right? It's what you find is important to you. If you find that you really believe in what you say about culture, then you will find a way to recognize people constantly. and you will figure out how to embed that into everything you do in that company. The same way you train your managers to produce really good forecasts and reports, you're going to train them to appreciate why they should recognize people constantly.
Brilliant, brilliant. In terms of sales process or world-class sales process, and a culture of sales excellence, how do you build that kind of rigor and that experience for your employees?
Yeah, I mean, it sometimes feels like those two do and don't go together, because when we use the word empathy, which is used a lot in business, right? Empathy could imply it's okay, you did your best. We totally appreciate your effort, and you think back to the joke of, everybody gets a participation ribbon when you're playing football or baseball or basketball, to really the only people that should be recognized are because of their, abilities in that sport. Some people are really good at one sport, some people are good at others. They're not all good at all sports. I think the same thing has to come to selling. I very much believe in empathy. I very much believe in regularly recognizing people, but I also believe that it's important to build a culture of being very assertive and persistent. And I practice and preach that in my business life, in my professional life. I think that's very critical. Why assertive and why persistent? How do you know you're not going to win? Or how do you get the upper edge on your competition in a given sales cycle? Assertiveness means you're not afraid to go ask the right questions. And sometimes they're very hard questions, but you're going to be the only one asking them because your competition won't be comfortable asking those questions. Persistence means you got to get that coffee meeting. What are you willing to do to secure that meeting? How often are you willing to message that individual? How many channels are you willing to use in parallel to try to get that individual's attention? I believe it's unlimited, right? And I believe you need to go into every single situation with that mindset if you really want to win, right? I mean, you have to be professional, you have to be courteous, but you have to maintain being assertive and persistent if you want to scale and grow and you want to outsize your competition.
Mm. In terms of when you're bringing somebody into a business, I'm sure you hire at all different levels, but are there any specific personality traits or things that you look for in that person? Not just what you see on a CV.
Yeah, many years ago, I worked at a company called DoubleClick that the large majority of it was sold to Google. And DoubleClick did an incredible job around this. They created a framework called Hiring for Wow. And to this day, I've pulled that framework out multiple times and I've actually used it and I've shared it with friends. And the whole concept was you don't write you don't write a job description based on what you want that person to do in the job that you're going to hire for. You write the job description based on the traits you want to see in the person doing that job. And so when you start with the traits, is the person need to be curious? Do they need to be meticulous? Do they need to be creative versus analytical, depending on the role and the job? If you start with the traits, it becomes a lot easier to look for those traits when you're talking to people. It doesn't necessarily involve asking 20 questions. It involves having a dialogue and seeing how they dialogue with you, trying to lead the conversation in some directions that allow you to test for those traits. Whether, again, it's things like being assertive, persistent, it's being thoughtful, maybe it's attention to detail. When they tell you about something, how much detail do they provide you to get a sense of how detail oriented? Do they know when to pause and take a breath so that they could let the other person speak? Do they have the ability to actively listen, right? And basically testing for all of those things. Again, you start with the traits, you turn that into a job description, and then you have a dialogue with someone. And obviously, if it's a very technical role, sure, you need to dive into more specifics. But depending on the role, and especially when you're trying to hire what you believe are going to be your best sellers, inside sellers, outside sellers, growth sellers versus enterprise sellers, those are the things that you really need to check for. Because what is their job? You're hiring them to go and have dialogues with people. That is their
Mm.
job. So if your interview isn't a dialogue, why? Why isn't it? Or at least some part of your interview process should be a dialogue, because that's what you're expecting as an outcome from this person.
That's really interesting. Obviously looking at a lot of CVs that I do every week, every month. So do you think you can get a sense for these people within the first couple of minutes, really, over and above the CV, if they're going to meet the bar that you're expecting, or do you think it's a longer dialogue than that?
I think with a lot of people, you could start to get an idea. You look at the CV, you get some sense of where they've been and some of the qualifications, they supposedly have. And I think once you start chatting with them, some of those things come out relatively quickly. Yes, some people may be a little bit stranger and quirkier personalities than other. Maybe you need a little bit more time to let them settle in. And I think you also have to account for the fact that people are also going to be a little more anxious and nervous in the
Yeah,
beginning of every conversation. So I think as long as you account for those things and you give it the appropriate amount of time, I think usually you can figure people out fairly quickly. That first impression
yeah,
is definitely important. If they come on a little too strong and you go, geez, that's how they're going to come on with my customers. I don't know if that's what I'm looking for. Or maybe depending on what you're selling and your situation, that's exactly what you want. And you go,
yeah.
yeah, that's what I want. And that other person didn't come on strong enough. I don't think they have it in them, right? For example.
Hmm. Okay. There's no doubt that the market, the SaaS market, or even MarTech market, to be specific, has had its challenges over the last 12 to 18 months, or maybe longer, really. But let's not look back. Let's look forward, right? As somebody that's obviously well connected and has a great perspective on the space, what do you see 2024 looking like? And if you're willing, what do you see that 2025 looking like?
Yeah, I think there's going to be a couple different things that transpire in the market. I think we're all seeing companies that have reached a certain level of venture funding that are going to struggle raising more money because growth rates have slowed down, and some are or are not able to achieve profitability based on the stage of their company. If
Mm,
growth rates are settling down, profitability is challenging, and it's hard to raise money, and opening a line of credit isn't like what it used to be because the interest rates are so high, I think we're going to see the companies that I would put in the bucket of things that I don't have to have in order to operate my business. I think we're going to see a lot of those companies maybe either try to sell themselves, consolidate,
mm,
and or close their doors. Now, what percentage is that going to be? That's obviously a tough question, but I think we're going to start to see the beginning of that later this year into early next year. I think there's always been the conversation of, well, companies will consolidate, right? Why do I use so many things when I can use less? And then the flip side to that thinking is, well, if I buy too much from one vendor, I'm not getting best of breed, right? And there's always, how do you manage between the two? I think as the current macroeconomic climate continues, and of course, in the US here, we have an election year, and that always creates its own weirdness to the markets.
yeah.
I think that it's going to create more. I want to buy from a vendor that can sell me more things and consolidation than maybe it has in the past. I don't think we're going to overreact. I don't think it's all of a sudden go throw out all the best of breed products and just buy everything from one vendor. But I think we will see slightly more of that thinking from individual companies in that regard, and really evaluating, well, do I need all of these tools? How do I drive my business more efficiently, but can I do it with slightly less of these tools? So
Mm,
I don't think it's an expansionist mindset, right? There's an expansionist of we need to put AI into our business. And yes, that'll be important. But if it's not sort of AI that really can truly drive an outcome, I think everything else will probably not be in a dramatically expansionist point of view. The only thing, data. Data will continue to expand. So where you put your data, whether you bet on the hyperscalers, you bet on Databricks or Snowflake for your data strategy, I do think that the data platforms will start to see a lot of success, right? And I think that growth will pick up again because what we said earlier, every company is going to realize that they can't leverage AI unless their data is in order. And most companies haven't realized that yet. And
mm,
so I do think the data companies and everyone that plays in the data space, if you're really relevant and your systems help somebody normalize, clean up, and manage their data more efficiently, your story is going to be you need me in order to apply all that AI you want. So let's make the gentleman's bet that I think some of the data related companies are going to be some of the winners heading into late this year and early next.
That's really, really cool insight. Yeah, I mean, Databricks and Snowflake have got an amazing story already, haven't they? But I think some of these more niche, I think you're totally right. From what I'm seeing from a recruitment standpoint, certainly some of those data pipeline, data quality companies, they are doing some cool stuff as well. So yeah, that's really good. And so if you were to sort of look back at a younger self, if you will, Steve, somebody that's maybe just moving into first line or just moving into second line leadership, and you were to give yourself some advice, right? What would that be?
Yeah, I feel like there's probably a lot of different things that come to mind, but to try to make it a little bit more tangible and concise, I'd say be an active listener. Don't go in with the mindset that you know better. If you are a great individual contributor, that does not give you the credentials that you're immediately a great manager. In fact, oftentimes you don't start out being a great manager, because what it takes to be a great manager is to see others' point of view and appreciate the path somebody takes to get to the same outcome you would get to, but their path is different. So that's where the active listening really comes in. Somebody imparted on me many years ago, and I think you and I may have talked about this in the past as well. I highly recommend your listeners take a look at the 1 Minute Manager book series. Very easy, digestible, snackable, if you will, books. 90 pages each. There's 3 books, even if you just read the first one. It really helps you through storytelling put some of these things in practice if you are truly first time leading a team, or maybe a second line manager, first time leading other leaders. It's something that will make an impression in your life. I guarantee it. I don't guarantee a lot of things. I guarantee that the first 90-page book will be very impressionable, and you will then go on to tell everyone you work with in the future about it as well.
Wow, there we go. I'm even going to look at that tonight on Amazon. You know what? That's going to be my next. I'm not a big reader, so it's good that it's 90 pages. If you were going to say 300 pages, that could take me a while. I'm going to look at that. Okay, well, that's been really, really great. Look, we're pretty much running up to time now, but I've got a few final sort of quick fire questions, as we always do on the episode. But I thought that was some great answers and depth and perspective. So hopefully our mutual listeners will agree and get some value there. So thank you for doing that, Steve. So here we go. So first answer, please, comes to your mind. No pausing or thought too much, please. Favorite piece of tech or app you are using now?
iPhone.
Okay. iOS or Android? You just answered that. Next question.
Yeah, sorry.
No worries. Night at the disco or night at the restaurant?
Oh wow, definitely night at the disco.
Okay, cool. Favorite food?
Cheese, any kind.
Okay. Anytime. Okay. Favorite movie?
Kill Bill #1.
Okay. If you were to describe yourself in 2 words, what would it be and why?
Happy-go-lucky, because I'm honestly always looking for fun and adventure and for something new.
It's a great way to be. Don't change. Favorite place that you visited on holiday or just generally visited in your life?
Oh my goodness. It's a tie between Hawaii and Greece, and only because I haven't been to Croatia yet.
Oh, okay. I've only been once. I highly recommend it. Whereabouts in Greece?
Santorini would be sort of my first recommendation, just because the beauty is breathtaking from above that port.
Stunning, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. What's your guilty pleasure?
I love
Apart
chocolate.
from cheese. Apart
I
from
love
cheese.
chocolate. I love chocolate. That's definitely, if I could eat, I would travel the world. I've literally done chocolate tasting through chocolatiers and chocolate shops as I've done personal and business travel over the years.
Okay, great. Great. Well, look, you've been a fantastic guest, Steve. Thank you so much for joining us today. Um, if if anybody wants to get in touch with you, about what we've discussed or anything else, like what's the best way to do that?
LinkedIn's always great. Please feel free to
Yeah.
reach out. I am very responsive. It's very rare that I don't follow up with somebody on LinkedIn. I recommend if somebody wants to do a connect, send me a one-liner or a two-liner about what it's about. If I don't know you, sometimes I may not accept the connection, but I'm usually pretty open to most connections with people, and I'm happy to chat and appreciate being on the show. Thank you for asking me.
Yeah, no problem at all. No problem. Thanks very much, Steve. We'll catch up soon. Thank you.
All right, sounds good. Cheers.